In boxing, the greatest single moment is when one fighter knocks out the other. Time is frozen on many of the classic knockouts in the history of boxing. From the devastating blasts of Jack Johnson, to the Dempsey-Tunney long count, to Sonny Liston's fearsome knockout of Floyd Patterson, to George Foreman's crushing of Joe Frazier, to Mike Tyson's amazing string of lights-out punches. The knockout is in a class by itself as a moment in sports. Let's take a look at just some of the immortal moments in boxing that were highlighted by the quick end to the event, the knockout. It's time for boxing's greatest knockouts. Muhammad Ali, the dazzling Olympic gold medal winning light heavyweight of 1960, captured the world's imagination with his stunning upset of Sonny Liston to win the title in 1964. The speed, the talent, the imagination, and the phenomenal skills of Ali made him a worldwide figure as well as a tremendous heavyweight champion. 3 bouts with Frazier, 2 with Norton, and the legendary rope-a-dope fight with Foreman will forever be remembered as classics. Henry Armstrong, when he was knocked out in the 3rd round of his first fight in 1931, who would have ever imagined that Henry Armstrong would eventually become the first man to hold 3 belts simultaneously? He rebounded to climb the ladder until in 1937, he took the featherweight title. A year later, Armstrong beat Barney Ross for the welterweight crown, and in his very next fight, he topped Lou Ambers for the lightweight crown. Armstrong remained the champ until 1941, and in a true changing of the guard, lost to a young Sugar Ray Robinson on points in 1943. Jack Dempsey, perhaps the best-known pair in boxing to this day, is the Dempsey-Tunney confrontation. Time has blurred the fact that Tunney twice defeated Dempsey to take away Dempsey's crown, and that after the second fight, Dempsey went on to win his last 53 battles, but none for the title. Dempsey's reign as heavyweight champ began with his win over Jess Willard in 1919 and lasted until 1926, when Tunney won his first match in Philadelphia. Roberto Duran was unfairly labeled with his no-mas loss to Sugar Ray Leonard, which clouded an otherwise brilliant boxing career. His remarkable victories and pound-for-pound strength earned him the Hands of Steel label and an invincible aura that made him a premier fighter in the 70s and 80s and a budding legend. George Foreman, another Olympic gold medalist who continued to devastate the pros until he demolished Joe Frazier to win the world championship, then only to lose it to Muhammad Ali in Zaire when everyone was convinced he was invincible. A premature retirement at the height of his career was followed by a comeback a full decade later. Joe Frazier. Smokin' Joe Frazier's blue-collar rise to the heavyweight championship with a win over Muhammad Ali in 1971 gave hope for the underdog in all of us. The Frazier-Ali series highlighted the heavyweight scene in the 70s and re-established boxing as a major, big-money, prestige sport. Sugar Ray Leonard. From Olympic fame to title belts in 3 weight classes, Sugar Ray Leonard's classic fights with Tommy Hearns, Roberto Duran, and Marvin Hagler made the middleweight and welterweight classes big money events in the 80s. Joe Louis, the legendary Brown Bomber, won 68 fights, but is best remembered for 2 of his 3 losses. The 1936 loss to Max Schmeling in New York, and his career-ending defeat to Rocky Marciano in 1951. His defeat of James J. Braddock in 1937 gained him the World Heavyweight Championship, which was followed by an amazing 25 title defenses in a row prior to losing the belt to Ezra Charles in 1950. Rocky Marciano, Was he the best? Well, he fought 49 times, and he won 49 times. He beat Joe Louis, Jersey Joe Wolcott, Ezra Charles, and Archie Moore, all of them champions. He started his career with 16 straight knockouts. Only Ezra Charles went the distance with him in a championship match. Rocky Marciano was a legend to this day. Archie Moore. He beat the Poco Kid in 1936 to start his career, and when he beat Mike DiBiase in 1963 to end it, Archie Moore had done it all. An unheard of 27-year career had seen Archie Moore span the boxing world, from Ezra Charles to Rocky Marciano to Floyd Patterson to a young Cassius Clay. Floyd Patterson. In 1956, a 21-year-old Floyd Patterson became the youngest ever to win the heavyweight crown, which stood until the arrival of Mike Tyson. He lost to Ingemar Johansson in 1959, but a year later he made history again by becoming the first ever to regain his crown after losing it. Sonny Liston stopped him in 1962, but Patterson eventually won 55 fights in his career, 40 of them by knockout. Boxing's greatest knockouts, the great fights. Jack Dempsey was perhaps as much a celebrity as he was a world-class fighter. He overcame 2 defeats at the hands of Gene Tunney and still remained recognized as a classic all-time champ. In this fight in 1920, Dempsey defends his crown against Chicago's Bill Brennan. Now, Brennan outweighs the champ 197 to 188, and the crowd's a little disappointed in Dempsey because he isn't going for the quick knockout. Dempsey in the white trunks is surprised that Brennan is quicker and faster than the mauler from Manassas, Colorado expected. The fight progresses, and the crowd becomes more agitated, giving new respect to the challenger. But Dempsey is still Jack Dempsey, and 2 lefts to the body are followed by 2 rights, and Bill Brennan is going to be a knockout victim. He wasn't the first, and certainly wasn't the last fighter to be knocked out by the great Jack Dempsey. Archie Moore on the right could do it all. He was a light heavyweight champion who also challenged several times for the heavyweight title. His career spanned from the 30s through the 60s, a feat unmatched in modern boxing. In 1954, light heavyweight champion Archie Moore defended his title against Harold Johnson. It's the 10th round in New York, and curiously, Johnson in the white trunks is ahead on points. Every time things get a little too close, referee Ruby Goldstein steps in to break it up. Now watch a left by Johnson. It leads to a right, which is a knockdown on Archie Moore. Moore's back up quickly, and he has a chance to recoup at the bell. Now it's Moore's turn. A series of combinations. A tie-up by Johnson. And more aggressive action by Archie Moore. Now Moore has Johnson on the defensive. And it leads to an 8-count knockdown of Johnson. Moore's continued assault leads to a technical knockout 56 seconds into the 14th round. A technical knockout allows Archie Moore to keep his light heavyweight crown. Floyd Patterson won it all at age 21 and became the first ever to regain the championship after having lost it. Here in 1954, he defends his middleweight crown against Jimmy Slade. First round action sees Patterson dominating Slade, knocking him down. Referee Harry Kessler counts to 8, but Slade holds on through the fight despite Floyd Patterson's continued attack. Another onslaught by Floyd Patterson, but Jimmy Slade perseveres. Now Slade's withstood a beating for 7 rounds. Time after time, Patterson knocks down Slade. And time after time, Slade gets up. Despite these knockdowns, Patterson doesn't get the knockout, but he soundly decisions Jimmy Slade to retain his crown. Rocky Marciano was an unrelenting, smashing, unfazed bulldog who never backed up and never went down to defeat. Despite all other comparisons, he remains the only undefeated champion. Against Joe Louis in October of 1951, Marciano's the newcomer, while Louis has seen better days. Louis has, however, won 8 straight in his comeback, but this fight is a different story. The ravages of time have left Joe Louis a shell of his former self. Marciano's clearly the aggressor. A solid left by Marciano knocks Joe Louis down. He takes the count on one knee as referee Ruby Goldstein counts it off. The Brown Bomber tries to hold on, but Marciano's not to be denied. Two lefts and a right combination by Marciano send Louis through the ropes. This is Joe Louis' last fight as Rocky Marciano knocks out a legend. Sugar Ray Robinson, considered by many to be the best pound-for-pound fighter ever, takes on Rocky Graziano and makes him one of his 69 career knockouts. It was the World Middleweight Championship in 1952 in Chicago. Sugar Ray Robinson was defending his crown, while former middleweight champ Graziano was looking to regain past glories. Graziano at 160 pounds outweighs Robinson by 2. It's the slugger versus the master boxer. Robinson's skilled combinations repeatedly score. Both men have won their last fights and are lusting after the crown. Graziano is 29, Robinson 32. And here in the 3rd round, Graziano scores a knockdown. But Robinson drops Graziano with a blistering right that drives the Rock's mouthpiece right out. Sugar Ray Robinson scores one of boxing's greatest knockouts and retains his middleweight title. Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber, was considered by many to be the greatest of all time. His skill and fluid movements made him the greatest fighter in the 1940s. The Louis-Schmeling rematch victory still stands as an all-time classic. In this match in 1952, Louis is on the comeback trail against Jim Sunvold, who provided no match for the aging but still potent Lewis. Sunvolt is driven to the canvas and suffers a savage knockout at the hands of the Brown Bomber. Much earlier in his career, Joe Louis fought Big Max Baer in a non-title fight in 1935. Baer outweighed Louis by 11 1/4 pounds. Yankee Stadium's packed for the event. Both fighters feel each other out early in the bout. Then it's let's get it on as each scores several points. Baer seems to run out of endurance a little quicker than Louis, and Louis backs him into the corner. Louis has a relentless style that wears the big man down. Louis's combinations go unchecked. With his relentless style, Joe Louis keeps up the onslaught, although Baer can always come back with a potent, strong punch. But showing no respect for the former champ, Louis puts him down on the canvas. Baer gets up. Louis continues, and down he goes again. Again, the big man gets back to his feet. Louis continues to bore in. In this pre-title championship fight of 1935, Joe Louis is in command against Max Baer. He backs Baer into the corner again. And then puts him down with another solid roundhouse. Joe Louis knocks out Max Baer, one of his many heavyweight knockout victims. Muhammad Ali was a showman, a braggart, and a champion. Ali brought a style and skills never before seen in the heavyweight ranks. Speed, finesse, and unmatched boxing skills made Ali the greatest. In January 1974, Ali faced Joe Frazier in a rematch. Frazier won that one, and Ali was looking for revenge. Frazier pressures in, just as he did in 1971 when he won the title. Ali uses his lightning-quick reflexes to stun Frazier. There's confusion in the second round. Referee Tony Perez stops Ali's onslaught and says the round is over. But it isn't. Was Joe Frazier spared a knockout? Now Ali continues his combination as he mounts up points throughout the rounds. Ali's in full control at this point. In the final round, Frazier must go for the knockout. He's trailing on points. As he did so many times, when Ali needed to hold off an opponent, he'd literally hold him off, getting him in a clinch, tying him up, frustrating him. No matter what Frazier does in this final round, it's too little, too late. With fluid ease, Ali continues to hold off the raging Frazier. It's not a knockout, but it's one of boxing's classic fights. George Foreman preceded Mike Tyson as the prototype young stallion who smashed his way through all foes to win the crown in most convincing fashion. Foreman virtually demolished all who stood in his way. That is, until the unbelievable rope-a-dope moves that Muhammad Ali used on him in Zaire. In Jamaica, right here in this fight, Foreman battles Smokin' Joe Frazier. Frazier himself is quite a knockout artist. Foreman dominates, though, as Joe Frazier rarely starts out strong. Taller and with a longer reach, Foreman keeps the stalking Frazier at bay. A left jab and a right uppercut by Foreman. Just a sample of things to come. Foreman using his longer reach and height advantage. And there's another left hook and right uppercut, and Frazier goes down. He takes the mandatory 8 count in the first round, but that's just the beginning. Down he goes again for the second time in the first round. Frazier hits the canvas 3 times in the first round. But that's just a sample of what's to come. In the second round, more of the same. George Foreman dominates the former champion. Frazier goes down again in the second round. 3 times in the first, 3 times in the second. Smokin' Joe Frazier hits the canvas on the onslaught of blows by George Foreman. Foreman virtually toys with Smokin' Joe as he pummels him into submission. It's all George Foreman as he gets Frazier with a TKO in the second round. Roberto Duran was an invincible fighter in his prime. Pound for pound, the most effective boxer-puncher in the ring. With his renowned hands of steel, Duran's matches with Hagler, Hearns, and Leonard established him as a legend. In March of 1974, Duran takes on Esteban de Jesus in Panama. Duran is 36-1 with 29 KOs. Who beat him? De Jesus, 16 months earlier in a 10-round decision. De Jesus in the striped trunks is a formidable opponent. He captured the North American crown in 1973 over Ray Leonard in Puerto Rico. Through the early rounds of this match, both fighters are equal to the task. Duran shows good defensive skills as he slips some of De Jesus' punches, as well as landing some good combinations. In the 7th round, those combinations for De Jesus. De Jesus gets up at 5. But though he was stunned, Duran can't finish him off, and De Jesus rebounds. It's boxing at its best, as the two fighters spar with great ability. De Jesus battles on gamely. Duran shows no lack of endurance despite the ferocity of the fight. Duran clearly the aggressor, and a series of left to the heads in round 11 knocks down De Jesus and knocks him out. That's it. Roberto Duran retains his crown. Sugar Ray Leonard was the idol of the 1980s. The new Sugar Ray used the rise of pay TV to make tens of millions of dollars on his fights. At the same time, he deftly managed to win 3 titles all at the same time, a feat not accomplished in decades. One of the fiercest rivalries of the 80s was Leonard and Thomas Hitman Hearns. Sugar Ray and Hearns go after each other with equal respect. Both men are quick enough and hit hard enough to knock the other one out. But by the 14th round of this match, it's Leonard who's stalking his prey. A big right to the head, and Hearns goes against the rope. It's not a knockout, but Leonard wins a classic. In fact, not all the great fights end in knockouts. In heavyweight boxing's biggest championship upset, Leon Spinks decisioned legendary Muhammad Ali to become one of history's most unlikely heavyweight champions. Who knows why Ali couldn't overcome the aggressive and tenacious Spinks, who gathered momentum with each passing round. Ali was sluggish, while Spinks was slugging. Ali looked soft and not in top shape. The fight was on national television, on the network for free in prime time, and Spinks put on a show. Spinks got in shots close to Ali's face and uppercuts, things that rarely happen to the champ. In the end, it was Leon Spinks as the new heavyweight champion. Rocky Marciano knocked out a good share of his victims, and one of them was Roland Lestraza. Lestraza was a good fighter, but he was no match for Rocky Marciano in his prime. Marciano was unrelenting. He bore in repeatedly and smashed Lestraza. In a typical Marciano fight, nobody gives ground. Finally, The Rock connects. A strong right to the head, and gone is his opponent through the ropes. Rocky Graziano was the middleweight champion of the world in 1947 and 48. That's Graziano on the right, and despite problems with the Army, he had a meteoric rise in boxing that was capped with his classic match with Tony Zale in 1946. Here in 1953, he battles Al Burton in a Pabst Blue Ribbon television fight. Although The Rock was on the downside of his career, he still had enough to knock Burton down before a powerful knockout punch ended the fight, giving The Rock another victory. That's it, some of boxing's greatest knockouts and greatest fighters. I'm Steve Grad, hoping you enjoyed this trip down boxing's memory lane.